for entertainment purposes only. And if you want true legal advice, contact your own lawyer.
Hey, we're talking about this critical psych test study. Now, what happens in courts is they'll bring psychiatrists in to determine, culpability of this person or this person's psyche, determine whether or not the kid should go to this parent or that parent, or in a criminal case. And two professors, one out of USC and one out of ASU, they wanted to do a study to determine if these are really legitimate type of psychiatric tests that they should be using. Now, the new study examined 876 court cases in the U.S. between 2016 and 2018. Denise, what did they find?
Well, they found it. There are different types of psychological testing.
Right.
First, you have intelligence tests. You have personality tests. You have attitude tests. You have achievement tests. You have aptitude tests. You have neuropsychological tests, vocational tests, and you have direct observation tests. So there's really 9 types of tests. And what they found was that much of these testing are really unreliable, and they're not being challenged in the court structure or in the court system or in any court cases as to their reliability. And that's what they found. The psychological tools are just being admitted, and they're just maybe not as scientifically accepted as to meet the Kelly-Frye standard.
Who came up with the idea to test the tests? Was that these professors on their own?
These professors just said that they basically said, we want to do this study and determine what's going on with these tests. Now, here's the issue. Did you know that in their tests they found out that only in 3% of the cases were any legal challenges brought forth as to the validity of the test? That is really low. Only
that is low.
3% of the tests, they said, look, we're gonna challenge this. Not that they won, just the fact that they challenged only 3%.
I was in trial yesterday, and this issue comes up about whether or not it should be done. And very interestingly, the judge in our case mentioned that our case was not the type of case at all where it should be done, because there was a recommendation that it should be done. And the parties couldn't afford it, number one. Secondly, there was no indication that either party had any psychological problems. And when you're dealing with psychological testing to determine if you're going to be a good parent or not, there's a lot of assumptions you make in these psychological testings about personality disorders or about characteristics in personality that may or may not impact someone's parenting. So I'm not sure that it's a great tool in the context of custody of children, but it is commonly used and it is commonly accepted.
One of the tests they talk about, the one that they primarily focused on, was called the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, the MMPI. In the criminal sense, this is when the test is used. If somebody has been convicted of a violent sexual offense, when they get close to being released from prison, in some jurisdictions, California and others, about 6 months before the end of their prison date, somebody from the Department of Health will go in and interview the defendant who's about ready to be released. And they apply this test, which tests whether or not the personality traits of the individual, plus it's testing for psychopathology. And if they score high enough and show that they have some sort of personality disorder, such that the person, the doctor believes that there is a risk that that person might reoffend, they then petition the county that incarcerated the person to have that person committed to the state mental hospital and for an indeterminate period of time. So as soon as they're done with prison, they think they're getting out. If the county does a trial on that and a jury says, yep, we think that they are at risk, the person is designated a sexually violent predator, goes to the state mental hospital, and they may never get out.
But that's only on sexual crimes, though, right?
With sexually violent predators.
Yeah.
That's how the test is used. And if they're saying now this test doesn't work, there's people that have essentially been still committed to state custody using a test that might not be,
in effect, imprisoned after their term and unable to get out until they can pass this test that may or may not be applied arbitrarily. I mean, are there absolute finite standards, or is it? I mean, that's my question.
I'll go over that in a minute. Go ahead, Denise.
Well, one of the things that they weren't just limiting it to the MMPI. they were also looking at other tests. And one of the most unreliable tests is called the Rorschach. I don't know if you've heard of that.
NFL gives it to players during the draft, the Rorschach test, to give it to every
exactly.
draftee.
That's where they're shown a picture, and then they have to say this is what they see in the picture, and then the psychologist interprets that. It is so subjective. And believe it or not, that is sometimes given in family law matters. Not as often, but it is sometimes
Can
given
you
in
see me
family
taking
law
that
matters.
test? What do you see in there? A cheeseburger. Well, what do you see in this one? Hot dog. I'm on a diet.
Well, it reminds
Todd Katz.
It reminds me of the joke about the guy that was doing the Rorschach test, and every time the doctor brought up the guy would respond, "Well, I see a naked woman, I see this, that," and the doctor says, "Well, I think you may have a problem here," and the guy says, "I don't know, you're the one with the dirty pictures."
Oh, that's hilarious. Well,
interpretation is a big issue.
Yeah, no,
exactly.
So here's what they're finding. Go ahead. They looked at hundreds of these that we talked about, and they found that 1/3 of those exams were not reviewed in the field's most prominent manuals. And of those that were reviewed, that they did review, 40% were graded favorably. Again, only 40% were graded favorably. Nearly a quarter were deemed unreliable. And the courts allowed them in.
So everybody either takes the test, has a 6 out of 10, is either loony, or the test by the determination,
Well, it depends what type
or
of
they
test it
can't
is.
tell.
Yeah.
So 60%, that's a lot.
Well, I don't know the numbers. There's so many numbers here. It's confusing.
Here's kind of a thing in the family law arena too. When they're being recommended by child custody recommending counselors or child evaluators or custody evaluators, they're recommending to their other professional friends. So they're recommending these parties go to psych evals, and then they're basically helping their other mental health professionals to make money.
That's it.
And it's not unusual in this area for it to be a $7,500 proposition.
Yeah.
And in other areas, in the Bay areas, it could be $10,000 to $20,000.
Are the lawyers going to kick back or commission on that?
No.
But these psychs are making money.
Well, and you talked about how very rarely these are challenged in court, right?
3%, according to their study.
And practically speaking, think about this. You get a person that might be subject to that test. They're a criminal defendant. They got no money. They get appointed a public defender, which on average is an attorney who's only been a couple of years out of law school, right? And this young attorney just out of law school is going to go toe-to-toe with a professional expert witness. I'm telling you, that's the hardest cross-examination to do. The experts in the mental health field will eat your lunch unless you know what you're doing.
You have to have your own expert that can help you. There's just no way. And cross-examination of experts is tricky anyway, but you have to have a basic understanding of what these tests are supposed to be doing and how they can be interpreted and how they can be misinterpreted as well. So always having your own expert is going to be important, but most family law parties cannot afford this type of evaluation process. And honestly, if you have a personality defect,
well, that's fascinating.
Go to the website, radiolawtalk.com. That's radiolawtalk.com.